Hello, and welcome to Fiction Fans, a podcast where we talk about books and other words too. The segment you're about to hear was recorded during episode 1, but we didn't have time to include it. We hope you enjoy this throwback bonus episode. So, say it was published in July 2018, and it has 5 out of 9 chapters, and it was last updated September 2018. And it's like, oh, you cranked these out, and you have no intention of ever coming back to this. Why should I waste my time on a story you did not want to finish?
Yeah, I mean, like, that's the kind of story that I wouldn't bother to start. But if there is a story that, say someone published it 2 weeks ago and it sounds interesting and there are 2 chapters, I'll give that a shot because I'm willing to take a chance that the author might continue updating.
I don't think I've ever run into that. It's either like last updated 4 years ago, sucks to be you, or it's finished. Like I don't think I really run into the in between. That could be because we do read very different types of fan fiction and also different fandoms, different like origin works. I don't read any Harry Potter, for example. Yeah. And I could definitely see that series lending itself to more long form.
Yeah, Harry Potter is basically the only thing that I read, really, in fan fiction wise. Despite not actually being a huge fan of the source material. I don't like Harry Potter, the books, that much, and I really don't like J.K. Rowling as a person.
Well, I don't think anyone's going to argue with you with that at this point.
No, probably not. But somehow it's the Harry Potter fanfiction that I keep coming back to. I've always been kind of amused by that dichotomy, like not actually liking the source material, but liking the fan work. It's kind of strange.
Well, I could see, like, Harry Potter is it's so big, because I don't think we could argue, like, I'm not going to try to argue. Like, it's a huge, not influential isn't even the right word, but most people know it. I'll say that safely.
Yeah, I think that's a safe thing to say. I think part of what draws me to the fan fiction is that the world is that Rowling imagined is so rich in opportunity for writers. Like, there are a lot of different directions you can go and a lot of different ways that you can interpret the magic system and the cultural society, and so there's a lot you can do with the source material, even if you don't like what she did.
You actually glitched, you paused out for a second on my end after you said it's so rich.
Oh no.
And I heard everything you said, but I was going to jump in and argue that the reason why there's so much fan fiction is because it's so bland. But then you finished rich with opportunities for writers, and I was like, oh, okay. In that case, I agree completely.
Yeah.
Because she leaves many.
I think there are a lot of holes.
Yes.
Yeah. I think there are a lot of holes in what she writes, but there's a lot of opportunity for writers to go in and fill those holes, and that's what makes the fan fiction fun to read.
Well, and it provides writers, fan fiction authors, with a sort of framework, right? They can start from these characters that we recognize, this world we're familiar with, and they can build off of it instead of having to start with, let me explain to you how school works. Because I would argue that the concept of a magical boarding school is not revolutionary.
It's not unique.
No.
I mean, nothing about her story is unique.
But
not really.
It provides a framework that people can work within. It provides this sort of starting point where we can all, it gives us a shorthand for, okay, yeah, when you say Hogwarts, I know you mean boarding school for roughly 11 to 17-year-olds. You don't have to explain that to me. Let's get on to the good parts. And I know I just said world building isn't the good parts, and that's going to be what people really come at me for, but I said it. A world exists for a story to take place in. No, a world exists for a story to take place in.
I think world building is some of the most interesting.
I'm not saying that world building is bad. It's just not. It would never cause me to pick up a book. I would
definitely pick up a book because it has good world building.
No, see, we're just very different readers, but that's good. That's why we're doing this. We can disagree.
Well, you can't have a story that is not interesting but great world building. Like, that's just, you're going to end up with a boring story if your story does not do anything.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, if you have minimal story and a lot of world building, I still find that fascinating. Like, as long as the story does something, then even if it's just exploring how the world building goes, like, then I'm happy. I was gonna say I'm generally happy to, like, I'm not too picky about things.
Mm-hmm.
I think you, out of the two of us, I think you may be the pickier.
For me, what pulls me into a piece of storytelling, no matter what it is, will almost always be the characters. That's just a personal interest. The people involved and how they interact and how they grow or don't grow. And that might be why I have no problem with reading something that has dislikable characters. Unlikable characters is the real word, because that's how people are. Most people are kind of unlikable, at least a little bit. And so I'm okay with reading about it.
If all of the characters are unlikable, I'm going to put the book down. If I don't like the characters, I'm just not going to keep reading.
For me, there is such a huge difference between a character I dislike and a character the narrator likes.
I mean, sure,
if I'm reading
those
a book,
are two very different things.
Well, I maybe I phrased that poorly, but this is something I've sort of grown into. I only say because I think The Catcher in the Rye is a very good example of how I have grown and changed as a reader. When I first read it in like middle school or whatever, not for class, I should say, because my dad told me I should. I did not like it because I didn't like Holden Caulfield. But then you grow up, you read the book, and you realize that's all right. You're not necessarily supposed to like him, and it's okay.
Unlikable characters who are supposed to be, who you are told through the narrative are likable, I'll put that down too. But on the other hand, unlikable characters that you're supposed to, who are the main character that you're supposed to dislike, life is too short for that. Why would I bother reading something with someone who I find distasteful?
Oh, you would hate The Great Gatsby.
I don't care about Yes, I would. There's a reason why I haven't read it. It is not my kind of book.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah, like
that's probably why I like it so much. I mean, looping back, that book is, I mean, there is, of course, all of the commentary about society during the 20s and et cetera, et cetera. But if you're looking at the piece as a novel, it is so character driven. And that's why I like Fitzgerald's work.
World building. I want more world building than just characters. I mean, you can't have a good story without good characters, but I want something with more than just characters. I want interesting settings and interesting world too.
Well, is that not just a comment on the fantasy genre? Because theoretically, we already know what America in the 20s was like because we took a history class in high school.
Maybe. I mean, again, everything that I've seen tells me that the characters are unlikable and I would not enjoy reading the book, so I haven't. And it's true that I read mostly fantasy or like academic text.
Mm-hmm.
I don't read a lot of nonfiction, I don't read a lot of fiction. it's just fantasy or science fiction, because possibly it's the real world setting has less interest to me as a reader.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. I don't read a lot of literary fiction, which is my shorthand for it happens right now, and there's not a lot different. There are some books that I do really love, not just like classics, which I will talk about. There's one I have in mind that I cannot for the life of me remember the name of, but they have to have something else going on, personally. But
Yeah.
I would argue that historical fiction, is contemporary. Oh, that's not the right word. It is the right word, but contemporary fiction would refer to stuff right now. For example, like Great Gatsby or Pride and Prejudice, they aren't historical fiction because they were contemporary. However, now
Right.
they are not like they're not modern day. So what is there a different word for that? There probably is. I can't think of it.
I mean, there's certainly not historical fiction, because I think historical fiction specifically refers to fiction that is written
That's why I stopped
by
myself.
an author now.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So, but to further my point, that is a different world. I do not live in Pride and Prejudice world. Maybe you do. I don't.
I do not live in Pride and Prejudice world, no. And I haven't read any Jane Austen works in quite some time.
But as an example of a story that takes place in technically the real world. Well, the real world.
Right, but I was going to say that I did enjoy those stories when I read them, because there is the aspect of unfamiliar to them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like it's still, yeah, it's the real world, but it's a real world that I'm not familiar with, and I enjoyed it, versus a lot of things set in the present day don't really appeal, because I know I'm not going to live through a murder or whatever, I hope, but I just don't have much interest in reading about the modern day. I live through the modern day. That's enough for me.
Well, that's so interesting, because then you're going to talk about some travel nonfiction. So it is, well, I will agree, that element of escapism, and even the sort of modern realistic fiction that I'm talking about is not a lifestyle that I will ever experience. So I think there is still that element of the unknown that is important. I don't want to read a book about myself. Is that,
yeah,
you know,
exactly,
like you said.
Yeah.
But all of that is to say, we got so off topic. We were supposed to be talking about the risk of starting an incomplete work.
We did get very off topic.
This has been a throwback bonus episode from episode 1. If you want to hear more, you can follow us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We are also on Twitter and Instagram @FictionFansPod. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week. Bye!